The sound of glass shattering echoed through the grand mansion. Lucy's mother had collapsed, her body lay motionless on the cold marble floor, her face frozen in shock. The secret was out. The lie had unraveled. Lucy stood there paralyzed, her heartbeat racing like a drum of war. She never thought it would come to this. Lucy Ogwena was the queen of Ogwedi City, not officially, but when a woman owned the biggest business, lived in a mansion that resembled a palace, and drove cars that turned heads, she was automatically royalty. Every morning, she stepped out in designer heels, her long silk hair flowing down her back, and her confidence towering above every man in the city. She had everything except love, but that was by choice. Lucy never believed in love. To her, men were distractions, weak, unreliable, liars. She had seen her father ruin her mother's life with his affairs, his drinking, and his empty promises. She had sworn never to be a woman who begged for love. Instead, she built an empire, made her own money, and vowed never to kneel before any man. But there was one problem, her mother. Mama Dorcas had only one daughter, and her biggest dream was to see Lucy in a wedding gown, standing before a man who adored her. She prayed, she fasted, she cried, and when nothing changed, she took action, dragging Lucy to marriage counselors, church meetings, and even setting her up on dates. Lucy was exhausted, so she lied. "I'm dating someone, Mama. You'll meet him soon." It was supposed to buy her time, but Mama Dorcas clapped her hands in joy and started planning introductions, forcing Lucy into an impossible situation. And that's when she made the boldest move of her life. She decided to hire a fake boyfriend, and not just any man, a man who had nothing to lose. It was a hot afternoon when Lucy's car stopped near a street corner in the city. She watched as a group of homeless men sat on the sidewalk, some sleeping, others begging, but one of them stood out, Ebuka. He wasn't like the rest. He was tall, dark, and handsome. His beard was neatly trimmed despite his torn clothes, his shoulders were broad, and his eyes held a sharp intelligence, and that was perfect. Lucy stepped out of the car, designer heels clicking against the pavement. She walked straight to Ebuka, who looked at her with curiosity. "Stand up," she commanded. Ebuka smirked. "Why?" Lucy removed a thick envelope from her handbag and placed it in his hand. "I need a man, not for love, for business." Ebuka opened the envelope, his eyes widened at the sight of banknotes. "What kind of business?" he asked. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You're going to be my boyfriend." For a moment, Ebuka just stared at her. Then a slow grin spread across his face. "Now this is interesting." Lucy crossed her arms. "It's just an act. You'll get money, clothes, and a car, but there are rules." Ebuka chuckled. "Haha, let me guess. No touching, no feelings, and definitely no love." She raised an eyebrow. "Exactly." Ebuka grin widened. "Deal." And just like that, the contract of deception began. But what Lucy didn't know was that some contracts don't just end with signatures, some end with broken hearts. Ebuka had never stepped into a store like this before. The air smelled of expensive cologne and polished leather. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting golden light over rows of designer suits. Everything looked like it belonged in a billionaire's closet. He stood awkwardly as Lucy scanned him from head to toe, her sharp eyes judging every inch of his tattered clothes. "Pathetic," she muttered. Ebuka smirked. "I wasn't exactly planning to meet a rich woman today." Lucy ignored his sarcasm. "We need to change everything. Your hair, your beard, your clothes, even your scent. It's so smelly." She snapped her fingers and a team of attendants rushed toward them like they had been rehearsing this moment for years. "Get him something powerful, classy, neat. He needs to look like a man who can afford me," she said. Ebuka chuckled. "And what does that look like?" Lucy's gaze was cold. Do your findings." The attendants dragged Ebuka into the dressing rooms, and within minutes he was transformed. He stepped out wearing a black tailored suit, his broad shoulders filling it perfectly. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his shoes gleamed under the store lights. Lucy's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. He looked dangerous, not the weak, desperate man she had picked up from the street, but someone who belonged in her world. Ebuka turned in front of the mirror, admiring himself. "Damn, admiring me. Ish." Lucy rolled her eyes. "Don't get too excited, you're still just my employee." Ebuka grinned. "And what does this job pay?" She handed him a khaki. "This is just now. You'll drive it whenever my mother is around." Ebuka whistled, spinning the key around his finger. "You really want to fool her?" Lucy's expression darkened. She needs to believe I have a serious man in my life. Ebuka watched her carefully. "Why do I feel like this is more about proving something to yourself than to her?" Lucy stiffened. "Just play a role and keep your thoughts to yourself." Ebuka smirked but said nothing. Little did she know he was already beginning to understand her better than she wanted. That evening, they arrived at Lucy's mansion. Mama Dorcas was waiting at the door, her face full of excitement. The moment she saw Ebuka, she gasped in joy. "My daughter, you never told me he was this handsome," she exclaimed, pulling Lucy into a tight hug. Lucy forced a smile. "I wanted it to be a surprise." Mama Dorcas turned to Ebuka, her eyes shining. "Welcome, my son." Ebuka smiled warmly. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mama. Lucy stared at him, shocked. His voice was deep and smooth, filled with respect. If she hadn't known better, she would have believed he was truly in love. Mama Dorcas beamed. You must be tired. Come inside. Let me cook something special for my son-in-law. Lucy's stomach twisted. She had planned to introduce Ebuka briefly and send him home. Now her mother was treating him like family. This was a problem. And it got worse when Mama Dorcas dropped the bombshell. I'll be staying here for a while to watch how you two live together. I want to be sure my daughter is in good hands. Lucy froze. Ebuka turned to her, biting back a smile. Oh, this just got interesting, he whispered. Lucy clenched her fist so tightly her nails dug into her palms. Her mother was moving in to monitor her relationship. This was not part of the plan. Ebuka, on the other hand, looked completely at ease. He had even started helping Mama Dorcas carry her bags into the house, laughing and talking as if he had been her son-in-law for years. Lucy grabbed his arms and pulled him aside. What do you think you're doing? She hissed. Ebuka smirked, acting like the perfect boyfriend, remember? You're paying me. Lucy glared at him. I control this game, not you. Play your role and don't overstep. Ebuka raised his hands in surrender. Relax, boss lady. I know the rules. Lucy exhaled sharply and walked back inside, mentally preparing herself for what was about to be the worst few weeks of her life. That night, Lucy sat on a luxurious white couch, sipping wine and watching Ebuka from the corner of her eye. He was seated across from her, his legs stretched out, looking too comfortable for someone who was supposed to be temporary. Mama Dorcas sat between them, smiling like a woman who had just won the lottery. It makes me so happy to see you two together. Lucy, I always told you that love is a beautiful thing. Lucy forced a smile. Yes, Mama, very beautiful. Ebuka turned to her, his lips twitching with amusement. Isn't that right, darling? Lucy almost choked herself on wine. Ebuka had never called her that before. His deep voice wrapped around the world like silk, and her mother's face lit up with pure joy. She had to admit he was good at this. Very right, my love, she said through gritted teeth. Mama Dorcas clapped her hands. This is wonderful. You two are perfect together. But, she narrowed her eyes. Why are you sitting so far apart? Lucy's stomach twisted. I want to see my daughter in love, Mama Dorcas continued. Come on, move closer, hold hands. Lucy stared at her mother in disbelief. Mama, that's not necessary. Oh, but it is. Before Lucy could protest further, Ebuka slid into the couch beside her and casually draped an arm over her shoulders. She stiffened. His scent, clean and masculine, filled her nose. His body was warm against hers. It felt unfamiliar. Ebuka leaned in, his lips near her ear. Relax, he whispered. Let's make Mama happy. Lucy forced herself to breathe as her mother smiled approvingly. Now that's a couple in love. Lucy faked a laugh, but inside she was screaming. Later that night, Lucy stood outside her bedroom, arms crossed as she glared at Ebuka. You sleep in the guest room, she ordered. Ebuka smirked. Scared I'll take up too much space in your bed? Lucy scoffed. I wouldn't let you sleep on my floor, let alone my bed. Ebuka chuckled. Relax, boss lady. I don't mix business with pleasure. Lucy rolled her eyes and pointed down the hall. Guest room now. Ebuka gave a mock salute. Yes, ma'am. As he walked away, Lucy shut her bedroom door with a sigh. This fake relationship was already more exhausting than she had expected. And for the first time, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Lucy woke up the next morning to the sound of laughter. She groaned rolling over in bed. Who on earth was making noise this early? Then she remembered her mother had moved in and so had Ebuka. She sighed, dragged herself out of the bed and made her way downstairs. To her horror, she found Ebuka in the kitchen shirtless, flipping pancakes like he owned the place. Her mother sat at the table beaming. Good morning, my dear, Mama Dorcas greeted cheerfully. Ebuka made breakfast for us. Lucy's eyes narrowed. He did what? Ebuka turned to her with a cocky smile. Morning, sweetheart. I thought I'd surprise my lovely baby. Lucy clenched her jaw. He was enjoying this too much. Mama Dorcas was clearly in love with the idea of them together. You see, Lucy, a real man takes care of his woman. Lucy forced a smile sitting down. So thoughtful of him, she muttered. Ebuka placed a plate of pancake in front of her, leaning down slightly. I made them extra sweet just like you. Lucy kicked him under the table. This man was going to drive her insane. Days passed and Lucy found herself trapped in a nightmare. Ebuka was everywhere. During the day, he followed her to business meetings, pretending to be a supportive lover. At night, he filled the house with laughter, making Mama Dorcas happier than Lucy had ever seen her. The worst part, he was actually charming. One evening, Lucy walked into the living room and found Ebuka fixing a leaking sink. His sleeves were rolled up, muscles flexing as he worked. Mama Dorcas sighed dreamily. You got yourself a good man, my daughter. Lucy rolled her eyes. I didn't get him, I hired him. Her mother ignored her. You should appreciate him more. Lucy scoffed. Appreciate what? Ebuka wiped his hands and looked at her with amusement. That I'm the best fake lover you'll ever have. Lucy hated how confident he was. And she hated even more that part of her was starting to believe it. One evening, after a long day at work, Lucy found herself opening a bottle of wine. Ebuka walked in and sat across from her. Tough day? Lucy sighed, rubbing her temples. You have no idea. For once, Ebuka didn't joke. He simply poured himself a glass and raised it to surviving another day. Lucy hesitated, then clicked a glass against his. To survival. They drank in silence. For the first time since this charade began, Lucy didn't feel like she was fighting him, and that scared her. Ebuka started bringing her flowers. At first, Lucy rolled her eyes and ignored them, but soon she found herself looking forward to them. One evening, as she was leaving for a meeting, she saw a bouquet on her car seat. A small note was attached. For the boss lady, even warriors deserve flowers. Lucy's heart skipped. She forced herself to ignore it, but it was getting harder. Lucy found herself staring at Ebuka more than she should. The way he smiled, the way he handled her mother with patience, the way he made her feel seen. One night, she sat alone in her room gripping a wine glass. She was in trouble. She was falling for a man she could never have. And she had no idea how to stop it. One night, Lucy thought her mother was asleep. She stormed into the living room, finding Ebuka on the couch. I'm done with this, she snapped. Ebuka raised an eyebrow. Done with what? This whole act, Lucy paced. I need my space. I don't want you in my house, in my life. Nothing. You're just a homeless man I picked up and you should be grateful I even pay you. Then they heard a sharp gasp from behind. Lucy turned. Her mother stood there, face pale. You lied to me? Lucy froze. Before she could speak, Mama Dorcas clutched her chest and collapsed. Lucy sat in the hospital room staring at her unconscious mother. She had done this, tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to cry. Ebuka sat beside her silent. For the first time, he looked at her not with amusement, but with something else, pity and regret. Maybe even love. Lucy swallowed hard. She had spent her whole life being strong, but for the first time, she had never felt weaker. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and despair. Lucy sat still, her fingers intertwined, staring at her mother's unconscious form. The machines beeped steadily, a cruel reminder that her mother was still alive, but barely. She had never felt this helpless before. Ebuka sat across from her, his usually playful face serious. You haven't eaten all day? Lucy didn't respond. I can get you something. Ebuka sighed. Lucy, stop punishing yourself. Her head snapped up, eyes burning with unshed tears. You think this is punishment? This is my fault. Ebuka exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. It's not that simple. Lucy clenched her fist. She trusted me. She believed I had found love, and I let her believe a lie. Her voice wavered. And now she's lying there unconscious because of me. Ebuka leaned forward, his voice gentle. Then make it right. Lucy looked away. She didn't know how to. Days passed. Lucy barely left the hospital. She refused to eat, refused to sleep, and she refused to see Ebuka. She had given strict instruction to security at her mansion. Ebuka was not to be let in. She had started this mess and she would deal with it alone, but Ebuka refused to disappear. He kept showing up at the hospital, bringing her food she never ate. He called, sent messages, even left flowers on her car. She ignored all of it. One night, she sat in her car outside the hospital, staring at the messages on her phone. Ebuka wrote them. I know you're hurting, but shutting me out won't change everything. I'm not going anywhere, Lucy. Her heart clenched. She wanted to reply, but she didn't. It was 2 a.m. Lucy stood by her mother's hospital bed, running her hand through her messy hair. The nurses had told her to rest, but she couldn't. She turned when she heard the door creak open, and it was Ebuka. She sighed in frustration. I told you to stay away. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and I told you I wouldn't. Lucy shook her head. Why do you care? This was a business deal. You got paid. Walk away. Ebuka's eyes darkened. Is that really what you think? She swallowed hard, looking anywhere but at him. It's the truth. He stepped closer. Then why are you avoiding me? Lucy's breath hitched. She didn't answer because the truth. She didn't trust herself around him anymore. The tension between them had become unbearable. That evening, Lucy left the hospital and went home. The house was too big, too empty. She poured herself a glass of wine, but it didn't calm her. There was a knock at the door. Her heart jumped. She knew who it was before she even opened it. Ebuka stood there, his face unreadable. I need to talk to you, he said. Lucy swallowed. I don't want to talk. He ignored her and stepped in. Too bad? She folded her arms. What do you want? Ebuka took a deep breath. To tell you that I love you. Lucy's world tilted. What? She whispered. He stepped closer, his voice firm. I love you, Lucy, and I know you feel something too. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to push him away, but she couldn't. Lucy felt like she couldn't breathe. She turned away, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. You are wrong. Ebuka left out a humorous laugh. Ha! Am I? He walked closer, his voice softer now. You push people away because you're scared, Lucy. But you don't have to do that with me. Lucy squeezed her eyes shut. You don't understand. Then make me understand. Lucy let out a bitter laugh. My father was a monster, Ebuka. He hurt my mother every day. He cheated, drank, and treated her like she was nothing. And she stayed. She let him walk all over her in the name of love. I swore to myself I'd never be that weak. I swore I'd never let a man have that kind of control over me. Ebuka softened. He had always wondered why Lucy was so guarded, why she refused to be vulnerable. Now he understood. But Lucy, he said gently, I'm not your father, and love isn't weakness. She met his gaze, tears brimming in her eyes. Then why does it scare me so much? Ebuka reached out and held her hands. Because it's real. For the first time in years, Lucy felt herself breaking. She wanted to push him away, to run, but she couldn't. Instead, she did something she never thought she'd do. She leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't planned, it wasn't calculated. It was raw, desperate, and filled with every suppressed emotion she had fought so hard to ignore. Ebuka responded, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss. It was unlike anything Lucy had ever experienced, passionate, intense, yet gentle. When they finally pulled apart, she was breathless, her mind spinning. She started, but words failed her. Ebuka smiled knowingly. You don't have to say anything, just feel. And for the first time, Lucy allowed herself to do just that. Lucy barely slept that night. The kiss with Ebuka had shaken her to the core. She lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over again. Her lips still tingled from his touch. Her heart still raced whenever she thought about the way he had looked at her, like she was something fragile, something worth protecting. But love was dangerous, love was unpredictable, and Lucy had spent her whole life avoiding it. The next morning, she did what she always did when she felt emotions creeping in. She buried herself in work. She left the house early, heading straight to her company's headquarters, where she spent hours in back-to-back meetings. She reviewed contracts, checked financial reports, and gave out orders. Control, power, money, that was what mattered. But even as she drowned herself in work, she couldn't stop thinking about Ebuka. Her phone buzzed, and it was Ebuka. She hesitated. Part of her wanted to ignore it, but another part, one she wasn't ready to admit, wanted to hear his voice. She finally picked up. Are you avoiding me? His voice was soft but firm. Lucy sighed. Ebuka, I told you. Meet me for lunch, he interrupted. Just lunch, no pressure. She hesitated. I'm busy. He chuckled. Of course you are, but you have to eat, don't you? Lucy bit her lip. He had a point, and truthfully, she wanted to see him. Fine, she said. 1 hour, that's it. Ebuka had picked a cozy private restaurant, not the kind Lucy usually went to, but it was quiet and intimate. She walked in dressed in an elegant white dress and high heels, looking like she had just stepped off the cover of a magazine. Ebuka, on the other hand, was dressed simply, black jeans and fitted shirt that showed his broad shoulders. But what struck Lucy the most was how comfortable he looked, unbothered, confident, in control. As soon as she sat down, he smiled. You look beautiful. Lucy rolled her eyes, but her cheeks burned. Let's just eat. The waiter took their orders, and for a moment silence settled between them. Then Ebuka leaned forward, looking at her intently. What are you so afraid of, Lucy? She tensed. We are not doing this. Yes, we are, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I know you're feeling something for me, but you keep fighting it. Lucy exhaled sharply. Because it doesn't make sense. Ebuka, I don't do romance. I don't do relationship. You're scared. Her lips pressed together. She said that he could see right through her. You think if you let yourself love, you'll become weak? That you'll lose control? He reached for her hand across the table, and for once she didn't pull away. But Lucy, love isn't about control, it's about trust. She looked down at their hands, his warm fingers wrapped around hers. I don't know how to trust, she whispered. Ebuka squeezed her hand gently. Then let me teach you. But before she could speak, her phone rang. It was the hospital. Her mother was awake. Lucy rushed into the hospital room, her heels clicking against the cold floor. Her mother looked weak, but her eyes were sharp. Lucy barely had time to smile before her mother's voice cut through the room. You lied to me. The words hit her harder than she expected. Lucy lowered her gaze. Mama, do you know what you did to me, Lucy? Her mother whispered. I prayed every day for you to find love. I trusted you. Guilt crushed Lucy's chest. I never meant to hurt you. Her mother shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. Then why? Lucy inhaled deeply. Because I was scared. I didn't believe in love. I didn't trust it. Then her mother's voice softened. And now? Lucy hesitated. Then she felt it, the warmth of Ebuka's hand on her back. She turned slightly, meeting his eyes, and in that moment she knew she loved him. Back at home, Lucy couldn't sit still. Her mother had forgiven her, but she had asked a simple question that refused to leave Lucy's mind. What do you want, my daughter? She had no answer, but now standing in front of Ebuka, she knew she needed to find one. Ebuka sat on the couch looking at her expectantly. She took a deep breath. I want to be with you. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Are you sure? Lucy exhaled shakily. No, but I don't want to lose you. Ebuka studied her for a moment, then smiled. Then don't. And just like that, he pulled her into his arms. This time, she didn't resist. Their relationship didn't transform overnight. Lucy still struggled. She still hesitated when Ebuka reached for her hand in public. She still found it hard to say the words, "I love you." But she was trying, and Ebuka saw that. One evening, after a long day at her office, she walked into the mansion to find Ebuka waiting with dinner. She smirked. "You cooked?" Ebuka chuckled. "I ordered. I'm not trying to poison you." He laughed a real laugh and sat beside him. Halfway through the meal, Ebuka reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lucy's breath caught. He opened it. Inside was a simple but elegant ring. "I know this started as a lie," he said softly, "but I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Lucy stared at the ring, her heart pounding. "Lucy," he whispered, "marry me." Silence stretched between them. Lucy's eyes flickered between the ring and Ebuka's hopeful face. Then suddenly she laughed, a real deep laugh. Ebuka blinked. "That's not the reaction I was expecting." Lucy shook her head, wiping a tear from her eye. "You really think I'd say yes without making you sweat first?" Ebuka smirked. "You enjoy tormenting me, don't you?" Lucy leaned forward, her fingers brushing against his. "I do," she whispered. Ebuka sighed dramatically. "So is that a yes or?" Lucy cut him off with a kiss. A deep, lingering kiss that held every emotion she had been too scared to voice. When she finally pulled away, she rested her forehead against his. "Yes," she breathed. Ebuka grinned. "You just made me the happiest man alive." Lucy smiled. For the first time in her life, she wasn't scared. She was in love, and it felt right. This story teaches that love isn't about power or control. It's about trust, vulnerability, and growth. Lucy believed that her wealth and independence meant she didn't need love, but deep down, she was only protecting herself from past pain. It took Ebuka's patience and her mother's faith to help her realize that love doesn't weaken a person, it strengthens them. True love isn't about dominance or submission, it's about choosing each other, flaws and all. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share. Stay tuned for more exciting tales coming your way. See you in the next one, besties. Mwah.